Michael B. Jordan was at home that afternoon, alone in sweats and socks, halfway through a lukewarm cup of coffee, scrolling idly through emails he had no interest in replying to, when a sharp, repeated knock at the door jolted him upright. 4, maybe 5 aggressive raps, the kind you don't expect in a gated neighborhood, the kind that carry more urgency than courtesy. He assumed it was a delivery, maybe a package left at the wrong address. But when he opened the door, the bright daylight outside framed a woman, late 40s, worn jacket, hair pulled back too tight, eyes wide with a manic kind of focus, who immediately raised her voice without preamble, without hesitation. "Give me your internet. You don't need all of it. You're rich. What's it to you?" And for a moment he thought it was a joke, some awkward prank, someone filming from the bushes maybe. But her face didn't crack into a grin, it just stayed tight, angry, and she took a step closer like she had the right, like this was normal behavior, and Michael, still gripping the doorknob, blinked, stunned by the sheer speed of escalation, the lack of context, the entitlement ringing in her voice. He stammered something like, "Excuse me?" But she cut him off, louder now, louder than the birds or the passing cars or even his thoughts. "I need it. I live nearby, and my router's been down for 3 days. And you've got the strongest damn signal on the block, and don't act like you can't afford it. Don't act like it's some big deal. You don't even know what it's like not having it. Can't work, can't talk to anyone, can't even stream a movie. And you with your big house, and your famous face, and your perfect life, you can't just let me on for a bit." And Michael felt his stomach twist, because it wasn't just the request. It was how she delivered it. Like he owed her, like fame made him public property. Like he was a utility now, not a person, and it wasn't fear he felt, at least not yet. But discomfort, that deep disorienting sensation when something breaks the unwritten rules of how people are supposed to behave with each other. And he said her voice was a bit much, that she needed to calm down, but that only seemed to ignite her further. Her voice rising a notch to near shouting, accusing him of being selfish, of hoarding what she called digital air, of hiding behind gates and cameras and pretending he wasn't just another human being. And she jabbed a finger in his direction and said, "You think being on TV makes you better? You think it makes you exempt from being decent?" And Michael glanced down the street, hoping maybe a neighbor had seen, maybe someone would intervene, but the sidewalks were empty and her tone was starting to draw his heartbeat upward, that anxious drumbeat that comes when you realize a situation's no longer casual, that it's tilting, fast, towards something unpredictable, and even though she hadn't moved to touch him or cross the threshold, there was something in her posture, in the way her words came fast and hot, that made it clear this wasn't going to burn out easily. And somewhere, deep in the back of his mind, Michael knew this wasn't really about Wi-Fi. Not anymore. Maybe not even at all. Michael kept one hand on the door, his fingers tightening around the edge, as if that alone would hold the moment together. And with a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, he said evenly but firmly, "I'm not obligated to give you my internet, especially not when you're shouting at me on my own doorstep. If you'd asked calmly, maybe I would have considered it. But like this, number, I'm sorry." And he meant it. Not the apology, not really, but the refusal, the clarity of it, and something in her face twisted. Not surprised, not hurt, just angrier, like she'd expected rejection and now welcomed it as fuel. And she fired back immediately, her voice skipping straight past indignation into a cold fury. "I'll call the cops on you. You don't belong here. You think just because you've got money and a name, you can treat people like they're nothing. They'll come, and they'll evict you, you'll see. People like you shouldn't live here, acting like kings behind walls." And Michael's mouth fell slightly open, not because of fear, but because of the absurdity of it all. The pure delusion laced through every word, and he said, "You know what? I'll call them myself." And without waiting for her response, he stepped back, picked up his phone from the entryway table and dialed. His fingers were steady, but his chest was tight now, not from fear, still not quite that, but from something else. Irritation turning into tension, tension sharpening into unease. She didn't back away. She didn't even flinch. While he stood inside, speaking to the dispatcher with calm, clipped words. Yes, a woman was at his home. No, she hadn't touched him. Yes, she was yelling. No, she hadn't left. She remained just outside the threshold, arms crossed, breathing heavy like she'd just run. And when he finished the call and looked back at her, she smirked and said, "I'll go inside myself then, see what internet you've got. Maybe I'll help myself." And she moved fast, like she might actually do it. He stepped forward instinctively, one arm outstretched in a reflexive block, not touching her but making it absolutely clear she wasn't coming through. Not a step further. "You need to stop," he said, low and tense now. "This isn't okay." But her face didn't shift. She didn't yell again. This time it was quieter, almost eerie, a mutter under her breath about how people like him didn't deserve privacy, how everything they had was borrowed from the rest of the world. And Michael realized then this wasn't just about her internet going out. It hadn't been from the beginning. She didn't see him as a neighbor, she saw him as a symbol, a target, something she was allowed to demand things from because, in her mind, his success somehow invalidated his boundaries. There was a silence between them then, a heavy, dragging pause that only broke when she turned and looked toward the street, as if calculating how long the cops might take to arrive. Michael stayed where he was, one foot behind the door, one eye on her. Still unsure how this would play out, still unsure what exactly he was in the middle of. But deep down, somewhere beneath the adrenaline, he felt something else begin to rise. Not fear, not yet, but a question, gnawing quietly. What if this doesn't end when they get here? Because the way she stood, the way she talked, the way her hands kept twitching at her sides like they were rehearsing for something, it wasn't the way a person behaves when they're just angry. It was the way a person acts when they're building towards something, when they've decided reality is flexible and that they're owed something no one else agrees with. Michael didn't move, he didn't speak. He just waited, the minutes dragging like hours as the tension stayed sharp and the street around them remained impossibly still. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that this wouldn't be the last time she came to his door. Not even close. And that what happened next would change how he saw everything. His neighborhood, his privacy, and most of all, the illusion that a gate or a name or even the police could really keep someone out when they'd already decided they belonged in your life, whether you wanted them there or not. It took maybe 10 minutes, maybe 12, but it felt like an hour before the cruiser pulled up. Quiet, unhurried, two officers stepping out with the kind of casual professionalism that comes from years of dealing with neighborhood disputes, barking dogs, noise complaints, and the usual suburban nonsense. Michael stepped back instinctively as they approached, his eyes flicking to the woman who had, up until that moment, remained defiantly in place, arms crossed, gaze locked on the front of his house like she had some stake in it. One of the officers, a younger guy with a clipboard in hand and a tired politeness in his voice, asked what was going on, and before Michael could say a word, she launched into her version, loud, fast, breathless, as if she'd been rehearsing it while pacing the sidewalk. "This man, this rich man, he won't give me his internet. I've asked, and he's refused, even though I told him my situation, and he has more than enough. And I want something done about it. He doesn't belong here, using all this bandwidth while I can't even check my email, and I think he should be evicted for not helping the community." And for a beat, just a second, there was complete silence. Michael looked at the officers, waiting for some kind of protocol, some formal response. But then the older officer, mid-50s, stocky, with the look of a man who'd seen too many strange days already, let out a sharp, involuntary laugh. Not mocking, not cruel, just incredulous. Like this was so far from the usual that even he couldn't keep a straight face. The younger officer followed with a chuckle, exchanged a quick glance with his partner, then turned to the woman and said, "Ma'am, unless he's breaking into your house and stealing your router, there's nothing illegal about someone choosing not to share their personal internet connection. This isn't something we can enforce. You can't just show up on someone's doorstep and demand Wi-Fi access. That's not how this works." She looked stunned for a moment, like their reaction didn't compute, like she hadn't even considered the possibility that her outrage might not be justified in the eyes of authority, and she started to protest again. Something about fairness, about community, about how people like Michael always get away with everything. But the officer held up a hand, calmly but firmly, and said, "That's enough. You need to calm down, or this situation could escalate in ways you won't like." If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to file a report. And trust me, you don't want that. We're not here to arbitrate personal favors, especially not ones involving private property. Now please, go home. She hesitated, her face caught somewhere between rage and confusion, but then, as if the weight of reality finally settled onto her shoulders, she nodded stiffly, muttered something that sounded vaguely like an apology without really being one, and turned to leave. Michael watched her walk away slowly, her back hunched just slightly. The fire in her movements dimmed, but not extinguished, and he had the distinct feeling that this wouldn't be the last time she tried something like this. Not necessarily with him, but with someone. She was the type that carried storms wherever she went. After she disappeared around the corner, the older officer turned back to Michael, gave him a look that said you wouldn't believe the things we see, and added, "It happens more than you'd think. Some people see a nice house and assume it means open doors, open wallets. Don't take it personally. Just don't let it get to you." Michael nodded, murmured a quiet "thank you," and watched them return to their cruiser, the engine humming back to life before fading into the distance. He stood there a while longer, the door still slightly open behind him, the air suddenly feeling heavier, like something had shifted. Not something big, not yet, but enough to leave a mark. He closed the door gently and leaned against it, letting the silence settle again, and as he looked around his perfectly normal, imperfectly safe house, he wondered, not with paranoia, but with a strange new awareness, what else was quietly circling his life, waiting for a crack in the gate, a moment of access, a reason to demand entry. This felt like the end of something small, but the beginning of something he hadn't quite named yet. And something told him, you'll want to stay around for what comes next.